Hey, you two. We'll just give people a couple minutes to make their way in. If anyone has anything they'd like to talk about tonight or like to have addressed, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll make sure it makes its way in. For now, let's just land in this moment. Anchor yourself gently in this moment. Nothing to push towards, nothing to pull away from. Just release your attention from other moments and be present with what's left. At first, this usually means slowing yourself way down, because we're usually rushing. But in that slowing, something just clicks into place, where you can let go of time. Where you just stop tracking everything that's happening through your sense of time. What if nothing happened? What if it were just this? Just what's in front of you right now. No entertainment, no storyline. What if this were eternity? At first, from the perspective of the story, there'd be a sense of loss. You know, like being put in solitary confinement. But solitary confinement is not outside of time. That's what makes it so untenable, so unlivable. Because there's some future moment that you're waiting on that takes too long to come, and some past standard that you're holding yourself to. But what if that past didn't exist? What if there was nothing to compare it to? And And so there was no future that you were trying to pull into the present moment. No future that you were trying to push your way to. If that were the case, that solitary confinement would just be pure beingness. All the suffering in your life comes from that comparison. That unwillingness to just open up into what is exactly the way it is. That feeling you get when you come to this class, where after a little bit of time everything feels comfortable. After a little bit of time you find your flow. That feeling is you surrendering to what is. When you surrender to what is, everything that's wrong about the moment disappears. And you can be comfortable. Because you've stopped demanding comfort. You're free because you've stopped demanding freedom. You're happy because you've stopped pushing and pulling towards happiness. It's the big paradox of life. To get what you want, you have to stop wanting it. To get what you want, you have to realize it's already there. To fulfill a sense of lack, you have to realize that nothing's missing. It's elusive, though. You know, after years of showing up for a class like this, where about midway through everything just feels completed and good. Not because anything's changed in your life, but because you've let go of the story of lack. You've let go of the story that it needs to be different. Even after years of experiencing that, it's still kind of the modus operandi to keep reaching outside of this moment, isn't it? Everything in the world asks it of you. That's why spiritual life requires a certain kind of resolve. An understanding that your real freedom, that lasting freedom, isn't going to come without you really giving your attention to reality. really showing up for this moment and not reaching outside of it. There's so much motion around you all the time. You're sharing this pool with other people who are scrambling in ways that have never worked to achieve their deepest desires. And you're trying to still yourself, but the water's turbulent. You come to a class like this and a number of you still yourself, and it creates a buffer around you so that you can have that experience. And then you go back into the world where things are turbulent. And you have to remember. It's like having the clouds part in the sky and you see the sun, but then for most of the time the clouds are back. And you have to remember what's on the other side of them. What is the actual nature of the sky? And what's just a product of clouds? What's just a product of illusion? A product of the fact that we're sharing this mind with so many people. That's why it takes your resolve. For you to set your sights in a direction of reality, a direction of sanity. To keep walking towards it. When you get thrown off balance, to care enough to do the things you have to do to step back into balance. That's the fundamental difference between somebody who really wakes up and somebody who attended a few classes but is still just sort of a mess. The person who really wakes up is the one who realized nothing in life is going to just hand this to me. The waters are too turbulent. I have to stay focused. I have to make major inroads and catch those moments when the waters are still. I have to find the little bit of stillness that exists around me through my own stillness, even when I'm in a turbulent pool. And I have to know when the tides are high and the waves are choppy, that it's just a product of people's minds, so that I don't create a bunch of new stories out of it. You know, we often talk about it like it's a pendulum. You're always swinging from one opposite to another opposite. From happy to sad, from protected to exposed, from comfortable to uncomfortably stagnant, from mobilized to frenetic. This swing that's always happening as you try and find your balance. What works in one moment doesn't work in another moment. So it's not about learning how to be more wakeful or learning how to be more still. Some moments require mobilization, other moments require more stillness. It's about showing up for what is and not getting lost in the story. There's really no protocol that can manage it. You have to actually have the skill set of balance. The skill set of meaningful response. You know, people often think of me as a very quiet person. It's not actually the truth. It's that when I'm around frenetic energy, I become still. If I'm in a safe environment where other people are holding the stillness, I actually can be quite talkative. I'm always just showing up for the current state of the moment. When people push things so far in one direction, they rob wakeful people of the opportunity to go in that direction. There's no sharing. The wakeful person just goes still. If they don't, they've noticed over the years that that's the reason they get sick. You know, over the years you just kind of watch when you let things spiral too far in one direction. You become vulnerable to different kinds of illnesses. And it just becomes not worth it. When I get up in front of a class, it's a room full of people who are still and open and listening. And I go from being something very introverted to something very extroverted. So things aren't this way or that way. Things are always shifting. And you show up for it. When you do that, you're actually living in alignment with this universe. Because balance is the principle of everything in this universe. It's the law everything follows. It's what it takes to exist. You break that law long enough, you fall out of existence. Anything you manifest in life is also held to that law. If it goes too far out of balance, it falls out of existence. And so you watch. You watch and you nurture. When something needs more water, you give it more water. When something needs to be pruned back, you prune it back. You pay attention. You become a healer in life, but it's just because you're watching the basic nature of people's imbalances. It's not usually hard to know what to do. People usually go out of balance in ways that are far from nuanced. It's usually quite blunt and obvious. You even come to work with your inner worlds and your outer worlds in ways that allow you to do more in your outer world. As my outer world becomes busier and busier, my inner world has to become more and more still, more and more flexible. For me, what I found is that I can get way more done without becoming sick if I can remove the stories off of everything that I'm doing. You know, the reason for doing it is all story-driven. You're sharing a world with a bunch of people with a bunch of stories. In my world, those stories have a lot of drama attached to them. You know, they're made up of many, many different people playing all kinds of different games. But you learn to see the story and then you don't engage. What you do is you boil down what needs to happen for the best outcome and you turn it into a series of actions that you just take. And you take them without any connection to the story in those moments. A simple to-do list. You know, for me, I've got a lot of people involved in what I do. So the tides of feeling within the story can be very, very high and very damaging. You know, stories that you could only afford to really be a part of every now and again, and only a few at a time. But instead, you assess the story, figure out what the actions are to move it where it needs to go, write them down, and then let go of the story entirely and just take the actions. You spend way less energy, and the result that comes of it is usually better because you don't have all the negative feelings of the story filtering through into your work. It's taken me a long time to learn that. In a shamanic training, you have a teacher who is basically pushing you into everything you hate most, igniting all of your stories and making it just a nightmare to live through, so that the only way to survive it is to let go of the stories. But life, if you commit to expanding and growing and taking on new challenges, is actually a way better teacher. You reach a point where you're either going to fold over or you're going to let go so that you can get your work done. And in doing that, you just expand to a whole next level. But it all comes back to balance, sanity, and showing up for what's in front of you. There's no one thing you can just tell someone to do. Your full intelligence has to be available in every moment. When I sit down to teach a class like this, it's at the end of a very long, busy day. There are other things that my body wants to do. But I step out of all those stories so that I can just be available to you. And in doing so, I'm able to speak to the moment with some clarity. Nothing prepared. You just show up and you find you're able to do it. And it works like that with everything in life. So tonight, let's just show up. We're going to watch our breath like we always do. We're going to take in the entire room with our eyes like we always do. We're going to feel our attention at our forehead and crown like we always do. But you're going to feel your way into balance. That means if you're starting to feel sleepy, you're going to open up wakefulness. If you're starting to feel too intense, you're going to sink into calmness. If you're giving too much attention to the stories and imagery passing through the mind, you're going to pull that silent nothing space from the space in between the stories and between the breaths forward. Nothing to think about. You're just going to be present with the skill sets that I've been training you into for years. You're going to make them yours and you're going to use them. Any questions about that before we start? Okay. Let's go in. Attention at the forehead and crown. Soften your vision so that your eyes take in the entire room at once. You can just kind of let the center of their focus fall to a spot on the floor or the desk in front of you. You're not going to zone out, but you're also not going to hard focus on any one thing. You're going to find that balance point between the two. A relaxed focus. You're going to release rigidity, but you're still going to maintain form. And it's not just one spot on the spectrum. It moves, and you move with it. It lives and breathes, and you live with it. Go for it. Awake, available, no other moment to compare this to. Just this, exactly as it is. In its fullness. It's not hard work. It's what is when you release all effort. Hard work is the experience of resisting yourself. This is an experience of non-resistance. That brings you back to what you are. After a day of pretending you're something else. What if nothing's wrong? What if right now in this moment, where there's nothing for you to do and nothing for you to fix, what if you just allowed the experience of nothing's wrong? It's as true as anything else. Yes, there are stories with problems. But this is a moment outside of the story. What if in this moment nothing's wrong? What kind of peace and restoration could you bring to your body and mind? To make it an ultimate reality, or if nothing else, to give you more resources when you head back into the story. To just let everything flow again. The way it did before you ate from the tree of knowledge. Before you collected this web of stories. A millennia of stories. Of more and more intricate knowledge. And has any of it ever brought you more peace than what you feel when you just let go of it all. You can even let go of it without abolishing it. It's always right there to pick back up. But the more you touch it, the more you can't put it down. It doesn't cost you or anyone anything to give yourself peace and put that down for a while. It doesn't cost anything because it's what you are. You just stop covering it up. But your anger and your stress and your grief, that's where the real expense is. Not a problem, really. But it's like a veil that comes over your eyes and you lose the will to lift it. The story is, there's not a problem in acknowledging it. But it's not an ultimate reality. And when you refuse to lift the veil, you cost yourself reality. My advice: treat the story as dangerous as it is. Interact with it the way you would interact with a hot stove. Aware of the dangers. Don't ever take the dangers for granted. And be without it frequently so that you can remember what you are. So that you can remember that you're comfortable and that you're okay. So that when you see another person suffering and you tell them in an ultimate sense that they're okay, that's based on actual realization and not just wishful thinking. So that you can grow strong enough to step into stories without losing yourself. To face people suffering with them without losing sight of the reality underneath it. The balance point between the reality of the world and the true reality of what you are. The realm of stories and the realm of awareness. That balance point is where your power is. This week, I'd like you to be aware of the pulls of opposites. Getting lost in the story or abandoning the story for awareness. pushing and the pulling. Stagnation versus frenetic movement. And I want you to show up for it in full awareness. And make yourself flexible so that you can find balance between those two things. Thank you, Linda. Are there any questions about any of that before we end for the night? Okay, everyone, give it a shot, and I will see you next Thursday. Have a good night. Thank you.